Questions and phrases. Reading. Listen and repeat. Do you like reading? Do you like reading? Not really. Not really. Yes, I like reading. Yes, I like reading. So reading is highlighted because I want to show what happens when you have more than one verb in a sentence. The first verb, like. All the verbs after like in the same sentence are going to be ing verbs or gerund. So I like reading, swimming, and going to the movies. Not I like reading to go to the movies. No, we want to keep it all the same. So we use a gerund after like. You can also use the infinitive, the to verb with like. It's a special verb where you can use either the infinitive or the gerund. But you'll see other verbs you can't do that. What do you like to read? What do you like to read? And you could also say, what do you like reading? So again, like you can use to, or you can use the infinitive, the to verb, or the gerund, the ing verb. I like to read romance and murder mysteries. I like to read romance and murder mysteries. I like to read nonfiction, like self-help books. I like to read nonfiction, like self-help books. And again, you can also say, I like reading nonfiction, like self-help books. I like reading romance and murder mysteries. Both of those are okay. What is your favorite book? What is your favorite book? I can't think of one offhand. I can't think of one offhand. My favorite book is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. My favorite book is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. My favorite book is The First Harry Potter. My favorite book is The First Harry Potter. What's it about? What's it about? I've seen this question a lot. If you've been following and doing each chapter, like you should be. You should be a master at English by now. It's about astrophysics. It's about astrophysics. It's about a young boy who goes to a school to become a magician. It's about a young boy who goes to a school to become a magician. Who's the author? Who's the author? Neil deGrasse Tyson is the author. Neil deGrasse Tyson is the author. J.K. Rowling is the author. J.K. Rowling is the author. How often do you read? How often do you read? Not as much as I would like. Not as much as I would like. I read about 2 books a month. I read about 2 books a month. I read almost every day to sharpen my mind. So read is the first verb. The second verb is to sharpen. All the verbs in this sentence are going to be infinitives. So I read, to sharpen, to increase my knowledge, to enlighten myself. They're always going to be an infinitive, the to verb, after read. You can't say, I read almost every day, sharpening my mind. No, use the infinitive, to sharpen. What is the one book you think everyone should be required to read? What is the one book you think everyone should be required to read? I'm giving you questions to make you sound native. So if you ask this question, wow, that was a really good question. Most natives don't even ask questions like that. That's a good question. Let me think about it. That's a good question. Let me think about it. Everyone should have to read Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Everyone should have to read Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And again, should have is always going to be infinitives. Should have to read, should have to do, should have to think. So it's always going to be a to verb. Or should have. Everyone should have to read a book about empathy. Everyone should have to read a book about empathy. Do you listen to audiobooks? Do you listen to audiobooks? No. On occasion. On occasion. Yes, I like listening to them. On my commute to work. Yes, I like listening to them on my commute to work. So you notice the prepositions to, on, and to always followed by a noun. What makes them a preposition? Unless there's an adjective describing the noun or modifying the noun. To them, to work, or on commute. Do you listen to podcasts? Do you listen to podcasts? No, I prefer watching YouTube videos. No, I prefer watching YouTube videos. And again, the verb prefer, we almost always use a gerund. So I prefer watching, I prefer going, I prefer seeing, I prefer doing. Always a gerund after prefer. Sometimes. Oh yeah. I'm assuming you've been through the other chapters, so a lot of these words you should know really well. If you haven't, make sure you go through and follow along in these videos. I know it's boring. It's not the funnest way to learn English, but your speaking will be so much better. I promise you. But you have to put in the work. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't put it down. It had me on the edge of my seat. It had me on the edge of my seat. I couldn't turn the page fast enough. I couldn't turn the page fast enough. There were so many twists and turns. There were so many twists and turns. I thought the story was interesting. I thought the story was interesting. The plot was very predictable. The plot was very predictable. I thought the story was dull. I thought the story was dull. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into it. It's a novel. It's a novel. It's a novella. It's a novella. It's a series of short stories. It's a series of short stories. The book jumped back and forth in time. The book jumped back and forth in time. The book jumped back and forth among different characters. The book jumped back and forth among different characters. The book moved along chronologically. so it was easy to follow. The book moved along chronologically, so it was easy to follow. I loved the characters. I loved the characters. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the character. I didn't think the characters were convincing. I didn't think the characters were convincing. One of the characters, Tony, reminded me of my brother. One of the characters, Tony, reminded me of my brother. One of the characters, Susan, reminded me of myself. One of the characters, Susan, reminded me of myself. The twist at the end was fantastic. The twist at the end was fantastic. The ending was predictable. The ending was predictable. I thought the book was insightful. I thought the book was insightful. I learned a lot. I learned a lot. There were a few nuggets of wisdom. There were a few nuggets of wisdom. The author didn't provide any evidence to support his claims. The author didn't provide any evidence to support his claims. I read this book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, where he talks about the differences between the rich and the poor and how they think. I read this book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, where he talks about the differences between the rich and the poor and how they think. I read this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, where he talks about being proactive rather than reactive. I read this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, where he talks about being proactive rather than reactive.